You're listening to Behind the Lines, a podcast presented by In Play Live and powered by Pinnacle, the #1 sportsbook where winners play and never get limited. Go to pinnacle.com/InPlayLive to sign up and get in the game.
They went to Evander Holyfield at one point. Remember, Evander Holyfield had his ear bitten off by Mike Tyson in a very, a historic moment in sports. Yeah, guess what? His earpiece wasn't working. Of all things to not be working, Evander Holyfield's earpiece. It was just a clusterfuck of complete and utter technical failure over and over and over again. Hello and welcome. It's Behind the Lines, powered by Pinnacle, purifying the sports betting industry. I'm Shane. Pace is with us as always, and we've got Gosu, John Wilson, joining us off the top this week. You're probably listening to this on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day or Boxing Day, so a very Merry Christmas to all of you out there. And guys, I don't know if you realize this, but we're recording this episode on Christmas Eve. So I'm calling this our Christmas EV episode. What do you guys think? Does that work?
I love it. John, do you know what Boxing Day is?
You explained it to me the other day, so I think
why don't you explain it to the U.S. listeners then, since you're an expert now?
Man, it's the day after Christmas, right? When you is it when you unbox things? I guess on Boxing Day.
I guess because you pack you got all these boxes and you figure out what to do with them, and some of them go back to the store for returns. I don't know exactly why it's called Boxing Day, but you return stuff and you get great deals at the stores. It's almost like a Black Friday, but now it lasts more than a day. It lasts a week or 2 weeks at least with the deals.
Same with Black Friday.
Yeah, so it's just, it's a whole season of deals. Anyway, Boxing Day, but it's a stat holiday. I don't know how it became a stat holiday. Maybe we felt like we needed one more after the Christmas Day stat holiday.
It's a smart tradition here in Canada. I like what we're on to here. Sit down. You should take note.
You guys would enjoy it. All right, guys. On today's show, we'll break down the NFL slate. We'll do the gridiron grind. We'll also talk about the college football playoffs. Also, Netflix doing Christmas Day and the NFL. So we'll dive into that because I got some thoughts on that. And but first, a big piece of news that we didn't get to cover over the past couple of weeks because we've had these great guests on that we've been chatting with. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to a few of those guys, head back to those episodes and have a listen. But a big piece of news that we haven't sort of been able to dive into that we've sort of been chomping at the bit to is a big purchase that took place in the gambling and sports betting world. Gambling.com Group purchasing Odds Holdings. Odds Holdings is the owner of Oddsjam, which I know many of you out there in our audience are very familiar with. So Gambling.com Group has purchased Odds Holding, owner of Oddsjam, for up to $160 million. It's $80 million up front, and then an additional $80 million depending on performance through the end of 2026. I have a few thoughts on sort of the future of Oddsjam and companies kind of like it, but Pace, I know that you have a lot of experience with Oddsjam. We had Alex Monahan, one of the co-founders of Oddsjam, on the show. I think at the beginning of this year, like very early on in this year, 2024, we had him on. And it was really interesting to chat with him. Congrats to him and to his partner, Matt. Matt's last name's escaping me at the moment, but I'm pretty sure it's his partner's first name is Matt, his fellow co-founder. What a score for them. Big win for them. Massive. So congrats to them on this big sale. But Pace, I know you've had some dealings with Oddsjam. What do you think of this?
Massive, sounds like potentially over $100 million sale in the the world of sports betting from the standpoint of like the winning side, which is pretty freaking cool. I think Oddsjam is the kingpin of the odds space. I don't think any other odds provider or like odds screen provider or odds comparison tools would be able to come close to that sales price or valuation. But it is actually interesting because it does set the tone for that type of thing to continue to occur on this side of the industry. Like obviously in the betting boom, we saw some major acquisitions with odds providers, right? Obviously the purchase of SB Tech and, MGM was heavily in the market for the bidding there as well. and a few others that were pretty notable that took place, obviously with Barstool Sports and Penn Entertainment, and then obviously over to Disney. So, crazy stuff. Now, from the standpoint of Oddsjam itself, it is really interesting because they have tens of thousands of paid users, tens of thousands of paid users. And as a user of Oddsjam, where I was like, okay, obviously we have a partnership with them, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to take this as seriously as I can. And they gave me and a few other members at In Play Live, I think John included, their most premium subscription. So the one that costs thousands a month, that includes, all the live odds, everything that they offer, it includes. And what's interesting about the product is whenever there is a notification to make a wager, and I think this is the case with any soft line, especially a pregame line. I think it exists for live as well, but any soft pregame line, there's a race to market. So, you are now competing with tens of thousands of people to get that line in. And in my experience, if you do have your phone out and, you're walking down the street and boodaloop, up goes this. And of course, with our phones, we can change the sound so that if it was an Oddsjam notification or any odds provider app, we got a special sound for that, basically saying it's time to make a bet right now. Right. So, you're walking down the street, up it pops. You flip over to the sports book provided that you have it. And of course, with Oddsjam, you do customize the books that you want it to notify you for. And it is important to note that not all books are compatible. And for someone like myself that, is in Vancouver and using some pretty obscure books, I'm not always going to be able to get the lines that are even set up for me. But boodaloo, off it goes. I go in to make a sports bet. Timing is almost impossible there. Almost impossible. Now, if I'm at my setup, I'm going to be one of the first people in. I'm going to be ready for it. And that's the kind of thing where I go, okay, how much time is this occupying outside of the games actually being on to make sure that I get in on, whether it's a middle, an ARB, a plus EV line, whatever the case. So there's that side of it. Can you get the line in? Then the second part of it is if you did get it in, and I've had so many people contact me over the last few years saying hey, just, a pass cross with an Oddsjam customer where they said essentially they got limited from one bet or two bets. And they didn't even necessarily win or lose. So when you're competing, with 20,000 plus people all getting the same line, and you do in fact get it, the sports books use Oddsjam themselves in the same screen. We know that because we met with Optic Odds, who provides it's the same company as Oddsjam. They just provide more of a B2B side. And we met with them, and they said that sportsbooks are using the very same screen with Optic Odds to mitigate their risk, which makes sense. So they can see when they have outlying lines, get notified themselves, and then of course punish the players who took those lines, right? So that sounds doom and gloom. Why would you use Oddsjam? Yet there's always this argument: why would someone keep it? Why would they still have these users if that was the case for them? So there's a lot of reasons for that, but I'm going to just basically boil it down right to the base level here. The sportsbook screen, both pregame and live, allows you to interpret the odds themselves and for you to make your own decisions. When that is the case and it isn't being necessarily spoon-fed to you, you are more likely to do better with your sports books than to be clipped just right out of the gate immediately. And the good news is that's actually their cheapest option of all of the products that they sell. So there's a lot of tiers that are in kind of the $100 to $200 range. And we have a promo code with them. If you use code InPlayLive15, I think it gets it down to $70 a month. And that sportsbook screen, for me, that is the value of Oddsjam. That is the product, and that is the way that it becomes a tool in your tool belt as a sports bettor. The $2,000 a month live stuff, it either posed the same problems that I just said, posted lines that actually were not on the sites themselves, or middles that just actually weren't there. And as they posted and you go and look at them, they were not accurate, just with the technology of pulling the true lines from the sportsbook. I don't know if you would have anything to add to that, John, because I know you've used it as well. Yeah.
No, I think that's a great point. I mean, I think it's also, it's a great tool to use, but you're right. Like as much as we're going to use it, the people on the other side are going to use it. Um, and I know I've definitely experienced being limited, maybe not necessarily because I bet something that was a line that was off of the market that I found on Oddsjam, but just I know that when you're ahead of a line change on stuff, especially the real softer books, they really go out of their way to try to target you and get rid of you.
And it is interesting because, like, for example, one of the books that I had turned on was Botano. So Botano is available in Ontario as a licensed and regulated book, and then they have a separate sort of entity that's available to the rest of Canada. I had to turn it off. Oddsjam accurately represented Botano, but every single line I was getting was from that sports book.
Yeah.
They limited me in one bet. So they limited me in one bet, right? The bet lost. So I never made any money from this site. And then my Oddsjam is just spitting Botano at me, when in reality, with the plus EV stuff, you'd almost want it to only be, Pinnacle, Bookmaker, and a handful of offshores, because then you're actually getting lines that you won't get hurt on, and you're going to get way fewer, if not any, opportunities, right? But at least when you know that you get one, you wouldn't be punished for it, right?
Yeah, and I think books actually, and I know I've made this point before, I think on this podcast, but I think there's a lot of books who know that they have weak lines in specific markets, in specific sports. We've joked about, like, MGM as an example of their basketball totals, like, just seem to be higher at certain points of the game than everybody else. And it's, instead of fixing that problem, it's like they use it as a trap almost to catch sharp sports bettors, right? It's like anyone who's betting this number around this time in a game consistently, they've identified where we are weak, and rather than fix where we're weak, we're just going to use that to get them off our site, right?
Right.
And that provides a lot of value to a book. Like if you're you're an operator, like, hey, that's a great way to sort of catch your sharps, so to speak. Makes a lot of sense. I wonder too about the future of a company like Oddsjam, as Pace. I think you sort of hit the nail on the head when it comes to 10,000, 20,000, and if they continue to grow, perhaps 50,000, 100,000 users all rushing to the same lines to hit a bad line somewhere, or a soft line somewhere, and how that erodes the edge over time, and how that edge can disappear, as you were kind of saying, in a matter of minutes, and I think as it grows, it'll erode those edges long term, and they just won't exist as often or as frequently, because Oddsjam has been so good at the job that it's doing, but grown to such a size where it isn't sustainable in that sense. And then the other side of this that I also wonder, where I sort of question the future of a service like this is, I think we're starting to see, and in our conversations Pace with a lot of the guests we've had on, they've sort of reiterated this, but I think we are really starting to see the domination of a few sports books, especially when we look, south of the border, in the U.S. I know, I'm in a regulated market in Ontario. We have a plethora of books, but there's still only a few that most people use. And, we're really starting to see FanDuel and DraftKings kind of own the market in a lot of ways. And we've covered a lot of those smaller sports books folding up shop in states that they had entered and moving out. And even in Ontario, where we've seen books fold up and move out. And I think as you kind of start to see these companies own a bigger and bigger portion of the market that they're operating in, where we're going to start to see a lot of those other ones fold up shop. So, the Oddsjam screen down the line might go from, a dozen books to only a half a dozen books, and kind of getting rid of even more of those opportunities. So I'm kind of, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over time. But that's something I think about when I think about the future, of the space, and what might be available over the long term. Any other thoughts on this before we move on?
Oh, big time. Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things we've really talked about on this podcast, especially in the early days of its inception, is advertising, right? So We talked about like being inundated with ads on TV in the start of all this, and then obviously the stuff that's happened in Ontario with regulating how you can advertise, and then obviously different verbiage and things like that. But there is this affiliate model. We've touched on that quite a bit, right? And pre-legalization, these sports books, and I think still to this day, but these sports books really had to jump through hoops. It wasn't like we turned on TSN and DraftKings was, TSN or ESPN and DraftKings had actually sponsored it, or FanDuel had actually sponsored it, right? And then obviously expert panelists giving us betting advice on there that previously had never made a bet in their lives, right? Well, in order to get around advertising on TV or social media or whatever it was, it really was this affiliate marketing. So whether it was some sort of influencer, whether it was a major website, that promoted sports betting in some capacity, that had a lot of users that the books would then pay to use that interface, that was really sort of the bread and butter of the industry, and certainly was offshore in the gray market. And that still exists in a big way. Now, gambling.com is really precisely that. I hadn't heard of them before this. So they definitely have news articles and different things to draw people to their website. But ultimately, this acquisition for them is the ability to then promote the sports books that Oddsjam has access to. Now, I know Oddsjam was doing that as well. They have affiliate deals with these sports books, right? Which I totally understand, especially if they aren't connected to players' losses, which is the traditional model, where the percentage that the player loses, you get access to a certain amount of it. But gambling.com is really in this deal for that aspect of this. Can they continue to grow Oddsjam? I'm not sure. Like, I really don't know. I think Alex has done such a tremendous job. Alex and the team have done such a tremendous job of doing that already, So there's really the affiliate play here, which is, again, going to be associated with players' losses. So I don't know how that'll all shake out for them. But yeah, Shane, kind of what you alluded to. It's like another company that's really, you were talking about it from the sportsbook side. Like, we may only see 5 or 6 sportsbooks on the screen. Well, what about all the companies that are now acquiring the other side of things to really isolate and narrow down to the ones that are doing it best? And then how does that tie into actually winning, right? So, if sports books or affiliate deals, sites that are generating their revenue from customer loss are the ones that are now acquiring these companies, what does that look like for winning players down the road? It's interesting.
Yeah, it is. And what does it look like for winning players down the road? It looks kind of bleak unless we get regular sort of step in and start looking at things from a fair play perspective, which some are, which is great to see. But the offshore side of things, I think, is an area that's probably kind of licking its chops, going, hey, we've seen this coming from afar, and we're going to just continue doing what we do in our space, and they might be the big winners in all of it.
Totally.
Yeah,
totally.
Anyway, okay, let's move on, because there's a lot to get to over this holiday period, and one of the big sort of storylines taking place this year is the NFL on Netflix on Christmas Day. So traditionally, I think most people who have been betting on sports or have been actively involved in major sports for a while, or at least tracking as a fan and paying attention to the sports calendar, know that the NBA has traditionally owned Christmas Day. It's kind of been the only sport on, and that's been a day for the NBA. And as a big basketball fan myself, I've kind of enjoyed that, being able to sort of flick on a game here or there in between Christmas Day activities. But now we've got 2 NFL games, and it's being broadcast on Netflix. Okay, so I have to sort of get this out of the way here, guys, and pardon my rant here, but did any of you watch Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight on Netflix? Chances are many of you did. Pace, we talked about it here on the show. I don't think I've ever watched a worse sports broadcast in my life for anything. That was the I couldn't believe what I was watching, and I watched almost the entire broadcast because I was curious about it from somebody that's worked in television and produced
in quotes too, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I really was. I had trying to watch. I should say I tried to watch it all. I had it on for a chunk of time, but as somebody who's worked in television and produced television for a long time, I had a lot of interest in this event from a broadcasting sort of perspective. I just wanted to see how they would tackle it, how it would play out. Single-handedly one of the worst things I've ever watched when it comes to a sports broadcast. And I'm not just talking about the fight, which was objectively terrible. Like, obviously, the fight itself, the main event fight, was just brutal. But everything that surrounded it was terrible. The commentary and the lineup of people that they had participating was kind of a joke. There were technical fuck-ups all the way through. And I'm not just talking about the stream itself, which I'll get to in a moment. But what I mean, like, there were technical fuck-ups. They were throwing to people who didn't have their mics turned on. They went to Evander Holyfield at one point. Remember, and Evander Holyfield had his ear bitten off by Mike Tyson in a very, a historic moment in sports. Yeah, guess what? His earpiece wasn't working. Of all things to not be working, Evander Holyfield's earpiece. It was just a clusterfuck of complete and utter technical failure over and over and over again. And then, they had all of the, one of the announcers seemed like, like some kind of carnival announcer. Like, it was just terrible. Completely brutal. And then the big story from it all was it didn't work. As it got closer and closer to the big two fights at the end of the night, the stream started crapping out. You couldn't watch it. It was freezing. It froze on me on my TV. I couldn't then, and then I tried resetting things and, leaving Netflix, signing back in, going back in. I couldn't get back in on my TV. I went to my phone. It worked for a moment on my phone, and then it crapped out. I ended up I missed the good fight, Amanda Serrano and, the Serrano-Taylor fight, which was awesome, but I missed it in the moment, missed huge portions of it in the moment because of this whole fuck up. I ended up watching the shitty fight, the Tyson-Jake Paul fight, on my wife's phone, like sitting there, because that's the only place we ended up being able to get it to work. So it was just a completely and utter failure from Netflix's side of things in terms of broadcasting a sporting event. Now, Netflix is saying that it was a great learning opportunity. They've stress tested their system. They also don't expect the same level of viewership for the NFL games that they got for the Paul Tyson fight. It was something like 65 million streams for that fight. They're only expecting about 30 million for these NFL games. But they did sort of say that they're already highlighting the peak time that they're most concerned about, 5:45 Eastern, 2:45 Pacific. That is because Beyonce is performing at the halftime show for the Ravens-Texans game. So that'll probably be the most likely time that, if it is going to crash, it'll probably crash at that time. For me, guys, at this point, I need to see it to believe it when it comes to trusting that Netflix will be able to deliver a flawless stream in a live sports event. I didn't even bother touching on latency pace because as far as I can see, I don't even know that they can pull off a broadcast of a live sporting event. All right, guys, that's my rant. What do you guys think?
I think it brings up a discussion that's bigger than Netflix, right? I think we're talking about broadcasting games and broadcasting rights. We've touched on that from time to time. Like, why the fuck am I watching a game on Peacock on Saturday? As soon as we hear Peacock game, like as soon as we hear the game's on Peacock, we pretend it's not on. And some of the games this year were actually good games. So then we go to like this NHL Monday night thing on Prime, or Friday night baseball on Apple, or Thursday night football on Prime. And like, it is a real struggle as a user to be victim to the different ways that these companies are trying to maximize their profits from a streaming standpoint. Forget about the fact that you need YouTube TV and Amazon Prime and Netflix. Forget about that for a second, right? To the average person, that's freaking annoying, right? For us as sports bettors, we're kind of like, give me the next thing that's the best way to watch the game. Like, give me that thing, right? So I am definitely not immune to spending serious freaking coin on how to watch games. But they can't figure it out for us. So you're the ones making all the fucking money off of us. You can't figure this out for us? That to me is what's so fucked up here. We're not talking about, oh, hey, Shane, I'm going to try to broadcast an NFL game today. It's my first crack at this kind of thing. I'm live streaming with Twitch and with Zoom and with Twitter or whatever, and I got to broadcast the game tonight. There's going to be millions of people watching. This is a multi-$100 billion company. This is one of the biggest tech companies in the world. The fact that this is even a discussion is insane.
Yeah, it's disappointing. You would think that they would be better. I just hope that they're figuring it out, or that they have figured it out, and that maybe like Tyson Paul was like a trial run at this kind of thing, where it was sort of a joke of a fight to begin with, and they were kind of like, hey, let's do this. We'll put this on. It'll be a big show, and this will be an opportunity for us to really test our capabilities. I mean, if that's the case, they failed the test miserably. and we'll see where things go. All right, John, any thoughts on Netflix, watching the game on Netflix? Are you concerned?
He's not going to use Netflix.
Concerned. I mean, yeah, honestly, it's on Christmas Day, so I'll be with family,
right,
and we'll have Netflix on and we'll be watching it. But if this were like a regular thing, I think I would do what Pace mentioned earlier, where I would treat it like the Peacock games, and I just wouldn't have it on.
Yeah.
Because also, I'm also, there's just other things that I could be spending my time doing rather than trying to figure out how to find this and get this game on, and then like dealing with buffering and all of that. I could be watching something else. I could have that screen on something else.
Yeah. Great point too. Like, does the NFL even belong on Christmas Day?
It does, unfortunately. I hate that it's on Christmas Day. I hate that it is. But it does, because of the fact that they have the numbers to back it. That's why the NFL used to play games in Toronto. They don't anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I went to a couple.
There's a reason why there's more UK games, right?
Mm-hmm.
I fucking hate UK games. I'm dropping a lot of F-bombs today. But when they have the numbers to back it, that shuts me up. So the real question is, will they be back on Netflix after this performance? That will be the real question. And just so everyone knows, if you're sitting here thinking like, oh, well, I don't want to use Netflix to watch the game, use your sports book. Okay. Yes, that encourages going in and betting. That's the whole reason why they have the product. Any sports book with BetVision. So Bet365 is great. If you're in Canada, you can watch the games there. John, I think, what are you using for that?
I use DraftKings, FanDuel, any of those.
On the book,
watch it on your sports book.
Yeah.
It's way, way, way more live. I think it's about 4 to 5 seconds behind the actual play at the game.
Yeah.
So there's an argument to be made that if you were at the game with potentially bad views, long lines, and the inability to go pee whenever you want, you'd be better off broadcasting it from your sportsbook than going to the game itself.
There you go. And maybe that's the long-term direction here. And you asked, will it be back on Netflix? The answer is already yes. It's a 3-year deal. So 2025, next year it'll be back, and 2026.
On Christmas?
On Christmas, yeah. Or at least on Netflix. And I think it's on Christmas as well. I'm pretty sure that's what I saw there. So
this is like a larger discussion as well. So not the games and how they're broadcast, but a business discussion. There's part of business that is staying in your lane. And what did Netflix do as a company? They brought Blockbuster to you. That was the first thing they did. They weren't an online streaming platform.
Yeah.
Your Netflix arrived in the mail, and they just made a more convenient version of Blockbuster. But what they showed was that they were innovators. They were a company that wasn't afraid to try new forms of technology to bring us the conveniences that we enjoyed in the entertainment aspects of our life. And to this day, it doesn't matter what streaming platform you are on, whether it's Hulu, YouTube TV, Disney Plus, the list goes on and on. Netflix is by far the best product. And I don't mean the best shows or anything like that. Apple TV, another one, Amazon Prime Video. It is the most user-friendly. They have figured out every little thing that when we are watching shows, how we want it to continue to play and how we want it presented to us.
Yeah.
There's no better product, okay? They have done such an exceptional job of going from a company that shouldn't have existed in the industry because someone could have squashed them had they have seen the trend before they did, to being an absolute juggernaut. Now, does that mean you don't expand into new areas? I'm not going to say no to that. What I am going to say is they're venturing into something that all the other players in this game are better than them at, and it's making them the same. Like ESPN and Disney, they know how to broadcast games. That's what they've done long before Netflix. Is Netflix innovating that process? No, they're not. Not at all. They are simply trying to do it as good as they have done it for literally 100 years. I don't know how long it's been. They're trying to do it as well as they are, but they can't because the product has so much latency. Regardless of whether they nail this, they can't. Not today, at least. So that's where you go the question, what are you doing? Stay in your lane.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how it goes on Christmas Day. I mean, maybe it'll be they'll pull it off, or at least pull it off in some way that they can call a success. I don't know. We'll see. But why don't we actually talk about the games now? We've sort of gone off here on a couple different tangents to start the game to start the show. But I think a lot of our audience out there have really been enjoying some of the content when it comes to actually breaking down the slates ahead. Pace. I think we pulled off another podcast teaser win this past week. Am I right? We got that one.
Yep.
Pretty sure we did.
Yep.
There we go.
Yep.
So
another dub.
That's a W for everyone out there that's listening and tailing those. We've got a lot to cover in this space, but maybe we'll save the NFL for a little bit. And why don't we dive into the college football playoffs, which are coming up in at about a week away or so. As when people are listening to this, it'll be about a week away. John, you want to kick us off here on the college side, since I know that you probably focus on this at least more than I do.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I guess I'm assuming most people that are listening either watched or are aware like the results of the first round, a lot of very non-competitive games. And I think the narrative kind of for a while was, these teams like Indiana, SMU that got in over Alabama. I know a lot of people were up in arms. I think Greg McElroy during the broadcast of the Indiana Notre Dame game kind of went on a rant about how Alabama should have been in over some of these other teams. But, Tennessee honestly probably got outclassed more than any of the other teams against their opponent in that first round. So the SEC people out there kind of shut up towards the end of that, I think. In the next round, I think it's a really big advantage to have that week off and to not have played a game that first week, because now you have 2 weeks of preparation for the opponent. Especially, it's actually an advantage as well in that, not because of the strength of the opponent, but that the favorites, the assumed opponent that you would have and would have been preparing for, won the game. So now you've been preparing for this exact opponent for 2 weeks. So some interesting lines out there. The Georgia, I think, was an underdog when the lines were there before the game, before Notre Dame beat Indiana and advanced, and now they're actually a slight favorite. I think they're like a 1.5 point favorite, which is interesting. I think that game is about the closest handicap game. It should be the most interesting one, because there's Ohio State, Oregon. We've seen them play before, and they played each other to a standstill essentially. I'd argue Ohio State was more impressive because they did it on the road and should have won if Will Howard knew how much time was in the game. So I think Oregon got a little lucky in that one. But at this Georgia Notre Dame game, it's two teams that don't play each other. Notre Dame hasn't played. They played Texas A&M week 1 and beat them in A&M. That's the only time they played the SEC. So I think that's interesting. I make it a pick as well, so I think that line's pretty good. I think there's a huge coaching advantage for Kirby Smart in that game. I really don't like Marcus Freeman as a coach that much at all in terms of preparation in game coaching. So I think there's value on Georgia. I think you can get upwards of plus 600 now that all the favorites have advanced, but you're talking about the coaching mismatch of going against Freeman and then potentially James Franklin. And it's just
insane coaching.
It's just that's worth more than I think the models and the handicappers can account for.
It's probably one of the biggest competitive coaching mismatches we've seen in the last few years of college football.
Yeah.
Because usually with the playoff format that we've had, we were getting Kirby Smarts and Nick Sabans, right?
Yeah.
Like in say what you want about guys like Ryan Day or the coach of Oregon's
Dan
name,
Lanning.
John. Yeah, they've been there. They haven't won, but they've been there, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
James Franklin has not been there. And whenever he's gotten close, we've seen him just get fucking destroyed.
Yeah.
Destroyed.
Yeah. So Franklin's, they're playing Boise. I think they're a double digit favorite against him, as I think they probably should be, but that's a game again. Boise's had 2 weeks. I assume they've been preparing for Penn State the entire time. It's on a neutral field. So you just never know in those games. It's James Franklin. They just won the biggest game in that program since, decades, really, I guess, since they won a title with Joe Paterno. So who knows? They could have a letdown there. On the other side of the bracket, our beloved Forks catching 2 touchdowns against Texas. Of all the games, I think that Clemson-Texas game was probably the most competitive. It still wasn't. It never felt like Clemson was going to win the game, but they did get it to within a touchdown at the end. With they were getting a lot of soft field there. But Texas looked like that you could move the ball on them. And I again, Arizona State probably been preparing for Texas for 2 weeks. The talent mismatch is definitely there for them, but I don't trust Quinn Ewers. Well, I never will. He's just the back foot specialist. He'll probably make a bad play there, and I think that game could actually be a lot closer. I think they're catching too many points. I think that should be around 10 and a half, something like that. So 2 touchdowns, I think is pretty good there. And then the last game, Oregon, Ohio State. Ohio State's favored. I think a lot of people are probably surprised by that. But that's exactly where I make the line, about 2.5. I think Ohio State's the better, more complete team. And like I said, I think they were more impressive in that, even though they lost to Oregon. So, we'll see. But Oregon, again, has an advantage. They got 2 weeks to prepare. So we'll see.
I just look at lines and I think to myself, like, the public money that's going to come in on Oregon as an underdog, not at home, but at home, because we saw 70-30 crowd in Ohio State against Tennessee, and the Rose Bowl is a lot closer to Oregon than it is to Ohio. So it's no neutral site is truly a home game, but that is going to attract some public attention for sure.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me, trying to get in the mind of the public, because the public is no longer they consume so much media around sports now, right? So the public wouldn't have been backing the Steelers like they were this weekend after they got destroyed by the Eagles 2 or 3 years ago. Now they're consuming so much more betting information. They're seeing all these trends of, this team does this when after a loss, or this coach is this as an underdog and all of that. And then what would have been the sharp side is now the public side. So a lot of that sharp edge is now lost because the number is now moved that way, right? Knowing that the public will also join them on that side. So I have a hard time sometimes figuring out will the public back Oregon as an underdog because they'll look and see they're an undefeated underdog, or will they have consumed all of the information about Ohio State just annihilating Tennessee and now hop on that bandwagon? I don't know. So it's interesting. Right now it's about 50-50 tickets is what I'm seeing. So
we'll see how that line moves as we get closer to the day. John, I got to ask you quickly, because you referenced Georgia plus 600. Is that to win it all?
It is to win it all. I think on FanDuel you can actually, and I'm sure other books have this, but I think on FanDuel you can actually just bet them to make the final, which I would think is actually a better bet. I want to say that was plus 270, but some of those numbers might have shifted because it's been a few days removed from the games. But like I said, I like their side. Carson Beck being out, I don't know that he seemed like he was already ready for his NFL life. I think he's one of those, when we were referencing earlier, the NIL stuff that Pace was talking about, he seems like one of those guys he's gotten his money, he's had the experience, and he's ready to cash again.
Right. Okay.
Oh my God.
All right.
He has the NFL life is, I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't think he has an NFL life. Okay. So there's one thing too that I think people should know as well, that Arizona State game, I know that team was, they are kind of the Cinderella or the darling version of like a March Madness right now, where they've just, even the fact that they got the bye is just like, it's kind of insane, right? And here they are in the quarterfinals. They didn't get the home game, right? I think that the stadium would have been electric there because they got a lot of that program's really come into light. I don't think that their fans are going to travel as well to Georgia as the Texas fans will. So that environment, I think, could be really hard for them to play in. Now, 14 points is insane. But as someone who wants Arizona State in the final, I think that environment's going to be really tough for them to perform in personally.
Yep.
John, do you think there's any other bowl games that you just want to touch on that aren't the playoffs? Is there anything that kind of excites you or jumps out at you, or maybe some traps that you think should be avoided?
There's definitely games I'm interested in. A couple games that I've bet. Some lines, a lot of those lines don't really exist anymore because a lot of the bowl season is kind of getting ahead of information. I like Texas Tech against Arkansas. That game is going to be, like, from a fan standpoint, I think it's going to be similar to an Arkansas home game potentially because I believe it's in Memphis. But I think Arkansas is missing like the majority of their like entire offensive starting lineup. So I think that's just kind of a bad spot for them. So I do like that. On that same day, I think this is those Friday games. The Georgia Tech Vandy game, I really like the under in that game. Two of the absolute slowest, run heaviest teams out there. I think that game could be a real snoozer.
That's a 51 and a half. 51 and a half. Is that your line?
Yeah. 51 and a half. 52 is a dead number, like 51 and a half, for sure on the under there. I think it's kind of like a squarish like thing, like play for an under, but it's just, prove me wrong. So those are some interesting games. I don't look forward to watching the Iowa-Missouri game. I think that Alabama-Michigan game is another game that could be just really slow. A lot of running. That's one that I'll probably look at an under on. That's basically that's before the first playoff game on New Year's Eve. That's in the morning, that game. And then later that day, South Carolina playing Illinois. I think South Carolina is really good. They're basically playing everybody in that game. Now that's a team that was like one of the hottest teams at the end of the year. I think they're going to build into that. And then I think Illinois is just awful. I think they're one of the worst, most fraudulent ranked teams that was ranked all year. Every time they played somebody, like, I think they played Penn State and Oregon and got just absolutely annihilated in both of those games. And I think South Carolina is on par with Oregon and certainly Penn State. I think they're a very good team, could have easily been in the playoff and given somebody some trouble. So I really like South Carolina minus 9.5 in that game.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that just about does it then for college football. Over to the pros. Are we ready to move on here? All right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, guys. So another teaser win last week, which was freaking awesome. Going to keep the momentum going. It was just a good week for teasers overall. And I think separately of teasers, if survivor pools had have started in like week 8, you'd have like 90% of leagues still in. Like our league dropped down from like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of entries to like 8 people, and it's been at like 8 people for 6 weeks now.
Yeah.
So like favorites are crushing it, which is why in week 16 we saw multiple 14-point spreads, 10-point spreads, all that kind of stuff. And we're seeing a little bit of that this week as well. There is a nice Christmas Day teaser. I'm actually not going to bet it myself, but if that's your thing, you'd want to jump on the Steelers +9 and the Ravens +0.5. They say don't go through 0, but that would be the play that I would personally take there. You could push the Ravens up to the 11 side, the Texans up to the 11 side, but the Texans look fucking terrible. They look like an absolute shell of a playoff team. The Ravens are obviously a really strong team in general, and still very much playing for their division. So that would be a fun one to take on Christmas, but that's not going to be the one that I actually recommend. John, is there anything that you like throughout the whole week in the NFL side?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you just said about those games. Historically, the road teams have done well on Christmas, and that's not just the NFL. That's like every sport, and that's actually true for a lot of major holidays. And you can say whatever you want about it. I think just an anecdote of like the people that are at home, the players that are at home thinking about what they're going to do with their families and stuff, or having just come from doing things with their families. Like I think it's just kind of their mind isn't there. Like, when you travel, you can kind of just forget about other things in your life and just focus on what you're there for. I think that's an anecdote, but it's true. It reminds me of when Hito Turk Glue in the playoffs for the Magic back in the early 2010s. He had like a baby, and his like home splits for like home and away were just awful. When he was at home, he's like, I don't sleep at night because I have a 4-week-old baby crying. So it's like, that's a proxy for this, but I think it's kind of just the mode. So I do like I think the Ravens, this is a potential rematch, right? So if the Ravens get the 5 seed, they'd play the Texans again in the first round. So I think they come out and really just try to lay it on them and make a statement there. And they've got the advantage of being that road team. So I do like.
So you like the 5.5?
Yeah, I just lay the points with them personally. And like Tank Dell's gone for the Texans. They've just really stumbled to the finish line.
That was rough.
And they looked devastated, like emotionally in that game, right?
Oh, CJ was crying on the sideline.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a big hit to their team.
They're on a short week after that. I really don't like them. I kind of want to fade them down the stretch. For other teaser opportunities, I like the Rams at home against the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals are just done.
Yeah.
Now the Rams, they win out. They win the division. I like them at home in that matchup.
I got a question. Is everyone in that division except the Rams done after this past week?
No, Seattle can still win the division, but the Rams are in the driver's seat.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So if the Rams win out, they win the division. And if Seattle wins out, I believe they win it as well. Like I think it's literally going to come down to that. If they both win this week, it comes down to week 18.
Okay.
And the Rams host that game.
Right.
So I like that one as a teaser. Tampa Bay hosting Carolina at home. Off a loss at Dallas. I think that's another good teaser spot to get them down to, I believe 1.5 to there. I hate teasing on the road. They have the Colts at -7. The only issue with that one is that they're going on the road to the Giants, who have, if you watched any of that Falcons game, the Giants, like if you watch any of the Giants games the last like 3 weeks, I mean, there's not a more obvious tank job in the last decade than what they're doing there. I mean, it's gross, and they should all be fined. But the Colts, I think the Colts, if both the Chargers and the Broncos win on Saturday, the Colts are done. So the Colts are technically still alive, but that could factor in, like they go on the road to New York, they know they're done. Like, do they really care? It's like, I don't know if I want to tease that spot. But if one of Denver or Los Angeles loses, then I'm definitely interested in it because they're alive, right? And then
I do want to jump in quickly here, John. I think this is a really good awareness moment for anyone that is betting on the NFL in the next 2 weeks. The mindset of a team being done or a team competing because they have to win to get in does not equate to value.
It
is so important
good point.
to base your bets off of motivation always. There's no debate there. But that does not mean it will happen. So if you think that a team like Arizona doesn't care about beating the Rams once they're already out, you're just simply wrong. Do I like the Rams this week? I love the Rams this week. That doesn't mean that the Rams are going to win. A lot of these division games are Carolina, another really good example. Yeah. Tampa's playing for their life now after that.
Carolina would love to play spoiler in that situation.
Yeah.
Big time. So I'm not saying don't bet them. I'm not saying they're not good teaser spots. I'm simply saying do not base your rationale for betting. And who was it? I mean, we just saw the Raiders win a football game that took them out of the number 1 overall pick. There was a big week 17 or week 18, depending on when it was, where it might have been the Bears. I'm not sure where they would have had the first overall. Texans, Bears, something like that. And they gave away, I think it was the Texans. And everyone said there's no chance they will win. They have to lose this game to get the first overall pick. Players don't care about the first overall pick next year. They want to go out there and compete for their contracts, for their ability to land on new teams, for their pride, their ego. They want to go win. So don't think that underdogs can't get it done this week. Sorry, John, go ahead.
Yep. Nope. You're 100% correct. I think a lot of people hear, like, it's still a good spot if it's a good spot, but a lot of people hear the situation and they think it's a 5-unit nuclear whale. You know, like I go all in on this game because they have to win and the other team doesn't care. But
nuclear whale.
Yeah, but no, that happens. It was what, 4 years ago, the Jags and it was the Carson Wentz Colts team, where the Colts needed to win to get in the playoffs.
Right.
All they had to do was win.
Yeah.
And it was the Jags that spoiled themselves out of a pick by beating them. And so, the players don't care. Now, I will say the best way to evaluate this is go look at the injury report for a team. And so when you go pull up the Giants or the Saints is another great example, they have like 30 people listed on their injury report. That is management, that is the front office, and that is the coaching staff tanking the team. It's not the players. So go find those things. Same thing in the NBA. Go find the teams that are listing like more than half their roster on the injury report as a way to get out of attempting to win a game. But yeah, those are good spots. And then the only other spot I'll mention this week is there's just so many bad games. I just want to stay away from almost every single game this week. But the Jets at the Bills, if you're going to do a larger teaser, I think getting the Bills like as a 10 spot or like a 9 spot
down
at
to
home
0,
there is a good one. So like, don't go through 0 or whatever on all that. So, but if you're going to throw in some underdogs like the Steelers on Christmas, and you want to do like get 3 teams at a 9 or 10 point teaser, I think the Bills is a really good one to put with one of those.
All right. So guys, for my teaser this week, there's a few games that I think really do fit the bill. The first are going to be the Broncos plus 9.5. I don't know if I can take it. The second is going to be the Rams. That's my favorite one of the week, down to 0. The next one that is kind of obvious to people that I think is a trap that I'm going to be passing on is going to be the Dolphins on the road to Cleveland. It's just a cold game with Tua, scares the hell out of me. And then the Packers up to plus 7.5 against the Vikings. Now, what I'm actually going to bet, I didn't even include the game in it, but I am going with the Ravens and the Rams 2-pick teaser.
Love it. Love that Rams pick. Big fan of that one. All right.
But I think, honestly, any combination of those games, if you wanted to do a bigger teaser this week, I'd go Steelers, Ravens, Broncos, Rams, Packers.
Oh, Packers. Okay.
Those 5.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
the Packers. Shane, you're a Vikings fan.
Yeah, and that's going to be a close game. That's going to be a close game. It's going to be
a playoff game.
Yeah.
That game is a playoff game in a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways.
Teams really need to win that game.
Is in a playoff game. Absolutely.
Yeah, and maybe you won't be able to get 7.5 on the Packers by the time things kick off, but that it makes sense. I'd love to be able to get 8.5 instead of 7.5. That would be the way I'd love for it to go.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Anything else, guys?
Yeah. Shane, did you win your OLG pool last week?
I did win my OLG pool last week. That was 2 weeks in a row.
So you tried to sell me a ticket for $10,000.
I might have tried to sell you a ticket for $10,000.
What did you win?
I won $655.
I'm so glad.
Don't even. I can't. Okay, like, can we just? Okay, so the week before that,
you can't control how much you won.
I cannot control how much I won.
That's not your fault.
No, it's not my fault. It's a total. It just speaks to the unknowable nature of the prize. Because I've been playing this for in my 12th season, playing this since 2013. It was a 15 game card. The previous week that I had won as well was a 12 game card. Both cards had 3 underdogs come through on them. Okay, so you have one where it's 12 games, 3 underdogs won. Another week where you have 15 games, 3 underdogs win. You would think that the 15 game week would have fewer winners just because you need to pick more games. Nope, not even close. Not even close. It was 570 winners or something like that. The previous week had 149. I mean, it just speaks to the nature of this prize and how difficult
it also goes to show, though, what I was talking about with survivor pools and things like that. Like, a lot of those big favorite parlays are coming through, especially if you could have just said, hey, I don't want to bet those 3 dogs, like those games, you just took them off.
Yep.
I'm sure people have done well on some of those big favorite parlays in the last few weeks.
For sure.
Shane, we started a segment unintentionally last week, given that you were going for your second win in a row. And I'm going to call it, Don't Box It, bet it. Because last week you gave us your dog of the week. Now it took a $60 million a year man
to go down
and get injured for it to win, but you won. So how was your OLG pool this past week?
I had 3 wrong this past week. It was a tough week. It was only a 13 game ticket too, so 3 wrong is definitely dead. I almost made it through the first slate of games if it wasn't for Arizona not completing the comeback. I needed them to make that comeback. I would have made it through the 1 o'clock. So they put the dagger in on the first slate of games. I had made it through everything else until that, but then I also got the San Francisco 49ers wrong. I also got the Tampa Buccaneers wrong, which is actually nicer. Having 1 wrong on a ticket is the absolute fucking worst.
Did you box the Eagles Commandos?
No, I took the Commandos straight up like I had planned on. And what a game.
Smart
what a
man.
game. I mean, I didn't plan it to go that way, but, yeah.
Don't box it, bet
Don't
it.
box it, bet
Give
it.
us your dog of the week.
Okay. On the Sunday, so the card itself is going to be a small one because we have 6 games taking place before Sunday, which is like, so it's going to be tough.
No,
so
Shane, it doesn't need to be for the OLG card.
It doesn't have to be. Don't box it, bet it is the Denver Broncos in Cincinnati. In Cincinnati. I love those Broncos. And
my heart.
Yeah, sorry, buddy. Those Broncos are a team that just show up. They want to win.
I was so waiting for you to say either the Cardinals or the Texans.
Oh no!
After we,
No. I like the Denver Broncos, and on the Sunday though, if I am looking at the OLG and I'm taking that into account because I'll just be doing that. I love the Browns at home against the Miami Dolphins, so that might be one where I consider taking the dog and not boxing.
I like that one. You're in my
I'm in your space there.
You're in the garbage bin with
these. Exactly.
And 2 of the teams you just brought up played each other last week with the Bengals and the Broncos. The Bengals and the Browns.
Yeah,
the Browns actually had a chance in that game despite what it appeared to be.
Yeah, they had a chance.
Dorian Thompson-Robinson was atrocious. He was as bad as any quarterback play you could really watch. And I think this is a problem in the NFL in general right now, is we've got these elite quarterbacks, and you could say this is the same of any time, but I think the gap is widened. We've got these elite quarterbacks. I would put Burrow in that list of elite quarterbacks or like the great quarterbacks, right? Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, obviously. List goes on to a certain extent. Jared Goff, for God's sake.
Lamar Jackson.
The drop-off after that, Lamar Jackson, the drop-off after that is unspeakable. And I actually think it's going to get worse because of the nil deals and the portal and the players not coming up the right way. I think the drop-off could continue to get worse. Dorian Thompson-Robinson was freaking awful in that game. They moved the ball, and he turned the ball over once they had crossed over half, over and over and over again. It was absolutely wild to watch. And I don't know if this is a nil thing, but you see it with Kyler Murray, who's definitely not a nil guy. You see it with Caleb Williams. It's like your first instinct is not to pass. Your first instinct is to try to scramble to then be able to pass. You don't stand in the pocket and throw. So the ability to scramble and run as a quarterback, they'll call it dual threat and triple threat if you got the brain for it, right? So Lamar Jackson's renowned as a triple threat quarterback. Mm-hmm. Josh Allen is a triple threat quarterback, right? He has the full package. But these quarterbacks are making the least primary responsibility as a quarterback their first instinct. I have to scramble around the pocket to now be able to pass. Some people will blame the O-line, but at the end of the day, you can see clip after clip of these quarterbacks where they're missing guys that are wide open. I don't mean missing the throw. They're not making the throw in the first place because their first priority is trying to dodge the O-line. So hopefully Dorian, if he's going to be starting for you with this dog play there, plays okay for you. But they were bad despite the fact that I thought they kept, despite separately at a score, they kept up in that football game.
Yeah, I think it speaks more to the Bengals defense, which is just, they just haven't played great all season, and they'll just keep giving opportunities. I think they got those turnovers given to them, as opposed to earning them. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Cool, guys. Anything else? That does it. That does it for Christmas.
No,
there we go.
I think well, if I could give maybe one little long shot that I kind of like right now is I like the Rams. You can get them plus 4,000 to win the Super Bowl. I think they have. It's hard for them to not win the division because Seattle could just lose to. Speaking of terrible team, the Bears this week, who would really be shocked, honestly. And then the Rams beat the Cardinals, and they've already won, so they wouldn't even need that last game. But plus 4,000. I mean, McVay Stafford in the NFC is probably the best head coach quarterback combo of a playoff team. You could put Campbell, Goff, maybe. Sirianni's negative to me, so even if Hurts is really good, then I still don't think. I think it kind of washes out. But 40-1.
I mean, I like it. I definitely don't hate it at all. That, and this is a team that's been there and done that too, right? So
the people were 2 months ago, people were talking about them blowing up their team, trading everybody. So.
We brought it up like 3 weeks in a row. We're like, this is the team. They've got everything, and they've proven it. Yep. They've been unbelievable. I also think Puka Nacua might be the best receiver in the league.
He's incredible.
That's obviously Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, fantasy points and all that comes into the equation. I'm talking about pure route running and the ability to bring down a ball. Yeah. It is unbelievable what he does.
Bring down a ball, break a tackle. He's physical. Yeah. I mean, it's impressive.
In the playoffs, when it's one score game, as many playoff games are, most playoff games are, when you need that one drive, like Stafford, McVay, Nacua, Kupp, those guys,
Kyron.
Higbee's back. Higbee came back, had a monster TD. He leaped 20 feet into the end zone. That was they're firing.
Yeah. On that note, guys, just because we said Merry Christmas, I think a lot of people at In Play Live probably need a bit of a break. I probably had 2 of the best betting weeks of my life, and they were bookended by 2 of the worst betting weeks of my life. And it's good to just freaking reset, unplug, turn the Christmas games off, Yeah, sure, it might be on in the background or whatever, but, to take a much needed break. The NHL's doing that. They have 4 days off here. I love that approach of just resetting and unplugging, and the whole mentality with betting isn't like bet big to win big. It's have a small amount of money that you don't need for life's necessities and run that into life-changing money, rinse and repeat. So take that approach, guys. Have an amazing Christmas with friends and family. Always remember to give back when and where you can. That doesn't mean financially all the time. That could be as simple as picking up a grocery bag for someone that you think could use a hand. Take the time to do that stuff. And we'll be back and better than ever. We have one more episode before 2025, but back and better than ever in 2025.
Great message to end the show on. With that, Pace, John, sports bettors around the world, till next week, keep eating those bucks. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Lines. Remember to like, download, and subscribe. We are on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Have a betting story or want to be featured on our podcast? Drop a note in the comments below. And if you want to join In Play Live, use promo code Behind the Lines.